South African economy and how the markets were performing. And we have Managing Director of Lehumo Capital, who is Maudi Lentsoane. Good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When we look at some of the developments in our country right now is the issue of political risk. We've heard talk that the government needs to do something with what is perceived as infighting within government. We heard the statements from Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that the government was at war with itself. And then the President in Parliament later in the week said that the government was not at war within itself, and seems like we're blowing hot and cold at the same time.
No, most certainly. I think, Colin, what we have to really agree on, and from the beginning of the year, back when the Minister of Finance was fired, there has been a number of developments and really things that were very unfortunate for the country. Almost some self-inflicted tragedies that could have been avoided for the country. And those unfortunate situations impacted so negatively on the progress that the country could have made. Be that as it may, I think the focus now should be on how we do things going forward. There's still this negativity surrounding, these political tensions. It's not helping this country, to grow. It's not helping, particularly in this environment where we need a much-needed growth to really make an impact as an economy. Growth is close to 0%. We've got all these crises. Unemployment is almost at an all-time high. So these are some of the crises that could be avoided and could be addressed much better. But the political tension is not helping at all.
But right now, what needs to be done is so tangible to an extent that the investor doesn't really care about shenanigans, because what they will do is just pull out. And secondly, the inevitable is that the country may be downgraded to junk status. Now, what needs to happen is the issue of the economy to be turned around. The issue now would be how.
Most certainly, and I think it's possible, especially when you look at, just take for example the manufacturing sector, where the focus should really be on focusing on improving the efficiencies and continuing to produce, particularly in that sector, because you've got very competitive, the currency is at a weak level. So that sector should really be flourishing. If only we were to focus on it. There are green shoots, there are positive in between. When you look at the current account deficit, it's one of them. It's an indication that in certain areas there is an improvement. But I think overall, there are certain areas that still needs a lot to be done. And of course, the political, as I said, the political situation is very unfortunate. One that could have been avoided. It's almost like scoring an own goal on our economy. The rating agencies are coming through, and with Moody's yesterday already alluding to the fact that they're putting those state-owned enterprises on a review. Those are some of the things that could have been avoided, and they can still be avoided, I believe, but a lot of work needs to be done.
Now, looking at the paradigm shift of the funding of SOEs, there has been a red flag raised, and secondly, a motion of no confidence in them that they will not be funded. And when we have the issue of not having a guarantee that the state-owned enterprises moving forward would be the way they were before in terms of helping to generate the country's economy.
No, most certainly. Remember, I think for a very long time, some of these state-owned enterprises went to sleep a little bit, and I think they relied heavily on the fact that they will just get easy money or free money from the government. The reality is that they need to operate those businesses like a business. It's a business that needs to make profit and sustain itself. It can never be that it has to be justified that a state-owned enterprise can just continue to survive on the fact that it will go back to the government, to the taxpayers' money for a bailout. So I think the developments that have happened with some of these asset managers pulling out, it's a message, strong message to these state-owned enterprises that they need to change their view. They need to change how they approach things. They need to operate like a business, like any other business.
Now, if we are going to have the complaints around the balance, the financial statements of Eskom, for example, not being made public. Yeah. And secondly, regarding SAA, where they're operating at a loss of billions of rand. These kind of things, when they come up, what do you think is going on within the mind of the investor with the country that is now having several items that are really not on the upside as far as the country's economic performance is concerned?
It doesn't give confidence at all. If anybody's sitting there thinking, should I be putting my money there? and investing in these companies that are so, badly run and not being able to really turn the corners, continuously recording some heavy losses and relying on the government which is also under pressure. You've got to really say it doesn't really give much confidence. And I think it's justifiable why there's been negativity towards them. And until we really see a turnaround, an overhaul of how they're really being run, we're going to continue to have these problems.
Now, looking at the JSE, we've had this week observing the performance of the rand with some gains having been reversed. When you look at the financial statements of several companies that have released their annual reports, most of them were stating in the general and review the issue of political risk came up again and again and again. Now, going forward, looking at the value of the rand now at around 14 rand against the dollar, 17 against the euro, where does this take the currency level?
I think it's still a very difficult one, but I think for now, I would probably say the rand is safe, especially when you look at the other figures that we had during the week, the current account deficit being one of them. It does show a bit of confidence in the economy, that there is some good signs that are being shown on the economy, and therefore, and the second one being the negative or the not so strong numbers that we've had, the economic data that came out from the US. One of the other things that have been putting the rand under pressure has been the US economy. Is the Fed going to hike next week? And I think looking at the numbers that we saw during the week, they reducing the chances of the Fed hiking next week. So therefore, the rand will probably get a break from the US Fed hiking interest rates. So chances are we could still see a bit of strength on the rand. But of course, there's the rating agencies coming through in December. There's also a possibility that the Fed could look to hike in December.
All right. Thank you very much for your views.
Thank you. All
right. Managing Director of Lihumo Capital, Maudi Lentsoane, giving us his analytical perspective on the week that was here on News Today.